Alright, Infinity Kingdom, welcome to another video. In this one, we are going to have a look at Lifelink and how it actually worked. This is one of the passives that I personally have been confused about and uncertain about for the past, 2 years or something like that. I finally pulled myself together and asked the development team, how does this work? And they responded. So, how does Lifelink actually work? What is it? Etc. That's what we're gonna get into. First up, the official description of Lifelink. It says that once activated, there's a 50% chance of creating a lifelink between two enemies. This link enables the sharing of received damage by 50% between the users and the two linked enemies. The link lasts for 6 seconds. So this passive allows you to establish sort of a lifelink between two enemies. The question is the damage actually shared as it says, or do we and how do we share it? Like, what does sharing mean? Does sharing mean that my immortal takes 100,000 damage and then your immortal also takes 100,000 damage? Or what? Like, is this a Thorns mechanic or is this a transference? Do we instead reduce the damage that my immortal is taking because you instead are taking part of that total damage? That is sort of the question. Is it a transfer or is it a Thorns mechanic? And, well, turns out it is a transference. It's a mitigation, which is awesome. This is why Lifelink is so extremely powerful. When an immortal possesses the lifelink passive, they're able to mitigate the incoming damage, reducing the damage that it takes itself, while also taking a portion of the damage, the damage mitigated, and turning that into offensive capability, turning that into actual damage transferred onto the two enemies in the link. This means that it's both a defensive but also an offensive passive, and a very powerful one at that. There's no doubt that Lifelink is a very, very powerful passive, and that is particularly because it does both. Defensives are usually pretty powerful, but having a defensive that is also an offensive is just amazing, especially in certain situations. In situations where you are faced with prolonged fights, consistent damage, Lifelink has a high uptime that makes it quite amazing for mitigating and producing an offensive capacity against, for instance, a holy setup or something like that. You could also run it on a tank up front. If you're facing an enemy Alexander, that's incredibly powerful, because suddenly you turn an enemy that's if you're up against something that's built for heavy burst damage but no defense, well, running something like Lifelink just says, well, I'm gonna take some of your damage and I'm just gonna give it right back, and since you got no defensives, you're gonna die away before I do. That's awesome, and it works incredibly well. It's without a doubt a very powerful setup, and something that I recommend for most builds, to be honest. I think that you're gonna have a hard time running, two competitive setups without using Lifelink. So question is, how do you use it, the smartest? Personally, I have 3 different ways of using Lifelink, like 3 different situations where I use Lifelink when I'm setting up my builds, my 3 loadouts. First up, it's to counter, abnormal front-loaded damage. Turning a tank into a damage dealer and, well, making a tank more tanky in the process is just amazing. Richard facing an enemy Alexander. Most people run Alexander with something like Dual Master, maybe Wind Rage, and then Anger and Combo or something like that. Amazing front-loaded damage, because Alexander is able to kill one target very, very, very quickly. But if that target has absolute defense and lifelink, well then Alexander is just killing his own teammates because all the damage is being reflected back at him, making Richard into a damage dealer all of a sudden, while also keeping the same skills that he has already. Very, very powerful. So that's sort of encountering enemies. Another thing you can do is just simply use it as a defensive. If you're running something like, let's say, a Manco, you need him to come online. He's doing absolutely nothing for the first bit of the fight because he's just standing there channeling immunity. But once he's done with that and he comes online, he deals massive damage if he's still alive and if his troop count is still high enough. That's the problem with Manco and other immortals like Manco that sort of has a slow ramp up. Manco's just sort of the epitome, the ultimate slow build up immortal. So running something like Lifelink Dual Master, perhaps even more defensive than that, ensures that he stays alive and stays at decent troop count for long enough to actually deal damage and come online. Third up is sort of taking a support immortal and turning it into a damage dealer. It's kind of similar to the first one, but instead of using a tank like a Richard and front loading it specifically against certain enemies, running it on if you're not faced with an enemy that has that single immortal that deals insane damage against a single target, Alex versus Richard, well then it's hard to set up Lifelink in a way that it does reflect as much damage as possible, because well, if you have Lifelink facing a Charles, it does nothing, right? Charles doesn't deal damage to it, so it only reflects whatever is taken as AoE damage and from the backline. But if you run it with something like Assist on a supporter model, on a backline supporter model, in this case we're running just a Cyrus with Assist and Link. That means that both Cyrus and Empress Wu, or whoever you have back there in the backline, all the damage taken by both of these immortals are suddenly being combined into Cyrus, and then it's being triggered by Link. That's a very powerful way to sort of make sure that Lifelink takes a ton of damage and is then mitigating a ton of damage and transferring a ton of damage. One thing that you may run into is Cyrus dying really quickly because you're taking on assist damage, right? So you may want to run absolute defense in here, and yes, that does work well with Lifelink as well. Absolute defense makes sort of an absorb function, but it functions as a shield. That means that it is still damage being taken even though it is being absorbed by absolute defense. Thus you can transfer it. So damage, all the healing that you see with absolute defense, well, that's damage that you can transfer with Lifelink. Works incredibly well. This is why it works so insanely well against Spider Boss as well, right? But the same principle applies for PvP. If you run it this way, you can make some quite exceptional plays. Anyway, there's probably a hell of a lot more applications for this amazing passive Lifelink. This is just sort of the basics of how I think about it and how it works. I hope this helped out somewhat. There's a lot of players been asking, how does it actually work? Well, this is it. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. I'm Myrak, I'm on 105. You can always find me there. You can find me on Discord, the IK Wiki website. Hit me up. As always, please do subscribe to the channel. I consistently release new content here on the IK channel and on the official IK Wiki website. Links are in the description. On these channels you can find guides from everything in IK, from events to talents, passives, finished builds and game mechanics. With that, I'm gonna leave you, and as always, thank you for watching and see you for the next one.